Hello, everyone. I'm Kenny Freeth. I'm one of the co-conveners with Sria and Oka, and I am currently in Japan, which is why I'm not there with you all. I was there in February, but not now. I've been saying to people, I feel like a shadow spirit hovering over the event. I've been watching everything, and so I'm going to introduce Theo Cuthand, um, um, wonderful artist, filmmaker. And then we're gonna screen some of his of his short films, and then we're gonna have a Q&A with him. So again, the big bios that you can look online, but I'm going to just give you a few tidbits. Theo Conhan grew up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He makes film about sexuality, madness, queer identity, and love, gender, and indigeneity. I knew I was going to get this wrong. Indigeneity. What a great word. His work is exhibited at galleries including MoMA in New York City, the National Gallery in Ottawa, and the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. He completed his BFA majoring in film and video at Emily Carr University in 2005 and his Master of Arts in Media Production at Toronto Metropolitan University in 2015. In 2019, he was one of the artists chosen to exhibit at the Whitney Biennial. He is of Plains Cree and Scots descent, a member of Little Pine First Nation, and resides in Toronto, Canada. He currently teaches at the University of Toronto, the Toronto Metropolitan University. Um, I first I first heard about his films through an essay that Sandra Aland wrote for my project Disability Futures in the Arts, Remembering the Now, Documentation, Invention, Queer and Trans Disabled Film. And when I was putting together Queering the Queer, Cripping the Queer for the big exhibit in Berlin, I knew I had to have his films in the show. And so we did. And so I guess we'll just, unless you want to say something first, Theo, we could just go into playing the film.
Yeah, sure, let's just play the films.
Okay, let's play the films. think what we're going to do is we're going to move to show Jameisha Prescott's film, and then we'll have a talk with about it all. Why don't we, if people have questions or comments about those films, just keep them, write them down or something. We will have we'll have time after showing on Black Pain. Let me introduce you to Mr. Prescod, who is there live, correct? um, Jameisha Prescott's essay film explores intimate stories from Black people living with chronic pain while reflecting on the colonial path of modern medicine. Using meditative visual sequences and a poetic voiceover, the film touches on medical colonialism and how it violently denied Black people the right to be seen as human. The film counters this issue by allowing three Black people with chronic pain to talk about their experiences in their own words. On Black Pain ends with the hope for a future where Black pain is believed by wider society across the world and within our own communities. A future where Black pain is seen just as urgent as anyone else's pain. I encountered Jameisha's work at the Damn Venice show in Venice. And when I reviewed the show, what I said was rejecting the history of silencing Black voices. Jameisha Prescott's video on Black pain juxtaposes slave traders' claim that Black slaves could not feel pain with contemporary doctors who ignore what Black patients tell them. Prescod includes and acknowledges the words of other Black disabled people in the video. Why don't we move and show the film, and then we'll get together as a group and talk. There we go. Hey, hi. There you are. Um, okay, I'm gonna just start this off. Um, there's so many different ways we can go with this. I should let you know that in my review, Jameisha, I had much more space for your piece, but it couldn't fit. And most of it was about the text. If pain is a bird, it's just watching this again just reminds me of that. I just want to mention that the text is so beautiful. So what's interesting about these these films to me is that both of you seem to take the micro, um, personal experiences either of yourself or others that you know, and transform it into the macro. The moment in two of Theo's films where all of a sudden Nazis are brought in, which is dear to my heart since that's what I've been writing about for 12 years. Um, in Germany where I live in Berlin. Um, and here you have these in On Black Pain, we have these personal experiences of pain that is brought into a very adeptly and quickly and succinctly into the whole history of of of, of black slave trading, and also this whole idea of not listening to Black people. So I wanted you to both to talk a little, if you could just talk a little bit about how you see your work, either formally or content-wise, moving from these very personal micro experiences to this macro, you know, this macro thing of taking on a whole system. I wanted to take that one up first.
I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think it's because like I'm indigenous and queer and mad and so I belong to all of these communities that are generally sort of like oppressed by larger forces. So it's kind of like the things I go through are like politicized just based on my identity anyway. So I feel like I can take these personal experiences and sort of like relate them to the larger global picture that we're undergoing with, the rise of fascism and how fascism attacks the disabled in the beginning, especially when it's like going through its targets. Yeah, so it's mostly like trying to get people to like sort of connect also like a human being with a larger social issue that might seem more abstract to them in a broader sense.
I think for me, I agree with what Theo said, but also I try to like bridge the past with the present and the big and the small. So something like medical colonialism is quite a large topic, but is experienced in like it's manifests in personal experiences on the day to day. So it was important to have these experiences expressed while talking about that larger, more abstract theme, I guess. And I think for me in my film, one of the things that was missing is based on a lot of research where I'm reading like medical treatises and journals that are from like the 1700s. And the thing that's missing is direct testimony from Black people. They're only spoken about. So something as small, it seems small, but having people just literally just talk about their pain for themselves is addressing the gap between what was lacking and then what could be now. So that's why the personal is there, I guess, because it wasn't previously in regards to how Black pain was spoken about during times of enslavement.
Um, I mean, you both deal with intersectional identities. So um, there was a very interesting discussion at the way back in February at the opening event at the when people came to see the exhibit, and Keith Piper talked about Donald Rodney's work, and the whole issue of that Donald Rodney was very big in the Black arts movement, but as time has gone on, he's been also viewed as a disabled artist. Um, how do you both deal with your intersectional identities? We saw clearly how you deal with it in the films, but how does that affect the content and the process of your work?
I think for me, it just gives me more avenues to talk about things. I think it also complicates things like you know, I don't know who knows this, but there's this term called indigiqueer that I invented in 2004, which has become sort of this identity label for Indigenous, queer, and trans people, and sort of like being at the intersection of being Indigenous and queer and trans, sort of helped me come up with that label, which is really just two words stuck together. But it's kind of like, yeah, I can see sort of like overlap and why, how politically how things relate to each other in different forms of identity. I think there's also some very paternalistic things that go on with like trans people and indigenous people and mad people that I can see operate in sort of similar ways to each other, like in terms of the debate about trans healthcare and then which I mean we deserve healthcare. And then there's also, debates about like how indigenous people should be treated in Canada and then obviously sort of the legal ramifications of when you become a mad person and when you lose your rights compared to when you have rights, based on, I guess, I forget how they call it. I guess based on your competency to like be sane or whatever, which comes and goes, but yeah. So I think there's interesting overlaps there that I find unique as in my intersectional identities.
think for me, I've said before that I was never an artist without being a black disabled artist. I would consider actually on Black Pain the thing that made me realize that I was one. Prior to that, I don't think I considered myself an artist. The arrival of those my intersectional sort of identities inform the work directly and even allowed me to be an artist in the first place. The desire to create or to speak to something that I think I couldn't explain through academia or writing, because that's not where my skills lie, I think sort of, I guess, allowed me to create in the first place. I'm not sure if I would be an artist if I wasn't disabled. So it's the only way I'm able to, like, the art and the creativity is the only way I'm able to even express the intricacies between those different identities for myself, but then also listening to others and being able to explore that as well. So, yeah.
One of the things I wanted to touch on before we open it up to the audience for questions. Um, I'm really taken by both of you how you use text in your work. So I thought maybe you'd have something to say how you know how you feel about putting text into your work. I mean, you use lots of quotes from various people as well as the voiceover. Um, Jameisha, you use the words of other people that you talk to about Black pain, and you overlay it with this I mean this wonderful poetic thing about the birds and pain. I mean it's stuck with me ever since I first saw the film. So can you talk a little bit about the use of text in your work? I mean, I'm a writer, so that's where I come from.
Is that for both of us?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for me, I don't know. I mean, I am a writer also. I think text, like with Anhedonia, I wanted to get across that, like, the sort of like scratchy writing, like there was a texture to that writing I was interested in playing with. And then with Madness and Four Actions, I mean, the text was like, it was talking about an experience I had, which was I was in a quiet room in a psych ward twice. And it was a traumatic experience, but I wasn't ready to talk about it in my own voice. But I wanted to honor sort of the survivors of psychiatric abuse who had spoken about it. So like I used their text with their names attached, and then like so also some I guess people who sort of founded psychiatry had things to say also. So it was kind of mixed up with that. But that was honestly about my experience. But yeah, I was just too traumatized to use my own voice about it. And I still don't think I've really talked about like my experience in the quiet room really and what that meant to me like on a psychological level. And then with Love and Numbers, like the binary code you see going by is translated it's the names of all the psychiatric meds I had taken at that point in my life. So it was like a lot of like there were some sleeping pills in there too, but like all for like psychiatric things. So there's some parts of the text that are like not really supposed to be legible unless you know, which I find interesting to play with. Yeah.
For me, with text and how that relates to the work that's still developing, I think I'm still figuring out the ways in which I honing my practice, I guess. But in terms of this film, I was reading a lot. It existed simply because I was just reading a lot of old medical literature about medical colonialism and doctors on plantations, etc. And then the work is almost like trying to find a way in which to take all of that text that I've read, put it into a film. And the writing came from the writing, or like the poetic voiceover you hear comes last. Everything else existed first, and it just needed to be almost like for me a thread that weaved everything together. I am also a writer as well, so now I'm noticing with the development of my practice that I often write an essay separately to any moving image work, because I often find that a lot is left out because it just doesn't feel like it works with the creative visual side of it. So then oftentimes after I finish a visual piece, I'll write a supplementary essay of the same name that allows me to sort of like get the thoughts out in a way that's more linear in a sense. And so yeah, as a big, I guess, reader, which is often where my films start because it's quite research based. It just starts with text, and then I guess I try to figure out how to arrange everything later on. So yeah, it sort of shifted a bit. With that first piece, there was no essay, but now it sort of developed in that sense.
Um, I had one other thought before I opened it up is that both of you are living in cultures that are dealing with things. In Canada, they're dealing with MAID, the medical assistance in dying, and here in the UK, I forget where the assisted suicide, whatever people call it. I think the law is still in Parliament or it's passed, and I just wonder how that change in the law of the countries will affect the way people see the films. It was just a thought I had. You don't need to respond unless you want to. But that was just a thought I thought of when I was thinking about the law, the context in which the work appears and how that can change over time. We can now open it for questions, which I can't see the audience. If somebody there needs to do that for me. Um, I don't know. Yeah, they're so good. Here we go.
Hi, I had a question in relating to how the work is made. When making work so intimately related to your experience, how do you get through the making? How do you look after yourself through that process?
For myself with Anhedonia, I didn't do a very good job of taking care of myself. I mean, the issue was it was a graduate film for my film uh program I was in, and I was having conflicts with the professor of the film class I was making it in, and I was also having a depressive episode, so I actually was going through like quite a hard time when I made the film, and then I won an award for it. Yay. But yeah, it's just I think it's just you kind of get better at it the more you do it, but I mean it's always there's always going to be that film that kind of takes like a little bit of a hit to your psyche, I think, and takes a while to recover from. I also had this work screen in like a larger screening, and there was like some other work involved in it. And I actually didn't feel very like mentally well after like even just watching what I had made. So it's definitely something you have to be careful with. Yeah, I think Anhedonia was the one that I had the roughest time making though. The other ones were kind of like I was kind of on a high because I was finally saying what I wanted to say. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes saying what you need to say is sort of healing, and sometimes it's just very, very hard.
I agree. I found that looking after myself was a work in progress itself. I didn't realize how much I should have been looking after myself when starting. I just thought it'd be fine. I was like, oh, I'll do this reading and make this thing. Wasn't necessarily listening to my body and realizing actually some of the material can be quite challenging, even tapping into your own self or listening to. I mean, a lot of the interviews that I had there were done on Zoom because this was during, well, it was outside of lockdown, but I was still practicing protecting everyone because we're all immunocompromised and vulnerable. And listening to their stories was quite challenging, hearing some of the things, like not everything is included there, but some of the things that were mentioned were very difficult to hear because of the pain that people had experienced. So now I realize that I just take breaks a lot. I think I also realized that, yeah, artists procrastinate in general. We all do it. But I think I was realizing my procrastination was self-preservation. So me like not doing the work, I think was actually like inadvertently, like subconsciously, I was actually trying to like tell myself I think I needed to like slow down a bit. That's at least what I could tell the funder when I was a bit delayed on the project. But yeah, I think taking breaks and then talking with people, especially people that were within the same community, is something I do now. Um, the project I'm working on, very similarly, I have to read a lot of colonial material and it actually is quite difficult. So I'm a bit better at it now where I read a bit and then I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a minute and then return. But yeah, it is challenging. I think also just accepting that it's going to be difficult regardless, especially with these themes. Knowing that in advance makes it better for me to protect myself and also the people that I work with as well.
We have an online question, so let's go to that one. Jun Choi says, asks, in terms of aesthetics, what inspired both of the filmmakers? Because you both have quite unique styles.
Aesthetics. I don't know. I mean, I've always kind of liked punk aesthetics, so I think there's something very punk about Anhedonia in the way it's done. There's also when I was doing Anhedonia, I was just thinking kind of like broadly of sort of like images I wanted to get cinematically, like the licking the chocolate syrup off of the window. I originally wanted to lick all of it off, but it takes a really long time, so I did not. But yeah, I think it's just like those images kind of spoke to me about that piece somehow. And then with Madness in Four Actions, like I wanted the repetitive actions of from The Miracle Worker with Patty Duke and I forget who the other Anne Bancroft, I think. And they're just kind of like Anne Bancroft in it is like basically trying to like modify Helen Keller's personality or like behavior really. And but in a really violent way, and I was interested in that like in relation to sort of like how violent psychiatry can be in trying to like sort of modify our behavior to make us like fit into society again. So yeah, aesthetically, I don't know. I think my aesthetics change for each work really though. And then Love and Numbers was way more like a sketchy kind of video poem. Yeah.
I think the gaps I was talking about before in Black people being able to speak about their pain for themselves informed their visual style. So you'll notice that in that film, you could hear what people were saying, but it wasn't a talking head. They were just looking into the camera and it was some close-ups and features of themselves. It was sort of wanting to just be like, this is the person that's talking, this is what they look like. It's almost like preserving their visual identity with what they're saying, which once again, the gap that I found was that when I'm reading these stories from these colonial texts, I can't see the person in my head. I can't envision them. I don't have an image of them. And so in subsequent films that I'm now making, it's the same thing. It's like, this is who this person is, this is who's talking, this is their story, because that was not something that I was able to access. I think of also like, in the piece I'm doing right now, is a lot of archival footage of Suriname, of Maroon and Afro-Surinamese people. And what struck me is like the clips of babies in the footage. This is footage from like 1940s. And then I was like, oh, that person could be someone's grandparent right now. Like they might still be alive and it'll be someone's grandparent. Then I thought, oh my God, I've never seen my grandparent as a baby. And that's something that colonialism has robbed from me, that I don't know what they look like. And also they don't have images of what they look like as children. They can't look back. And so when reading this stuff and seeing that absence, it might seem simple as just having someone look in the camera and not say anything. But I think for me, the visual style was informed by those gaps that of the people that I couldn't see, that I'm reading about, being spoken about without their own words. It was just a way to almost like be like, okay, you can't do that now. Like now I've got at least some sort of artifact where that's not possible. You can see them and you can hear them. So that's sort of where the style came from, I guess.
Cool, thank you so much. My question is around how pain is a really important part of our humanity. And during Sandy's talk yesterday, which was really interesting, she was saying how the social model of disability can be really empowering, but it's also important to remember our pain and the difficult sides as well. And I was just thinking for you guys, whether it be mental pain or physical pain, how do you think of that link between like sort of pain and humanity or pain and beauty and yeah, that sort of dichotomy?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think kind of mental pain's kind of like just a condition of humanity that we all have to undergo while we're here. I mean, obviously, I take medication to alleviate what could be a really horrible existence if I was just sort of raw dogging my brain right now. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like part of life, but obviously when it becomes too much, yeah, it can stop life. I mean, obviously like even just with anhedonia, like it was like so much mental pain that I was thinking of, like ending it, which is not in like in a space where I'm not feeling that much mental pain, I do not ever want to do that. But I can see how I have felt driven to think about it. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question though.
I think for my idea of it, I guess, like social model of disability, obviously, I love and helps me also have conversations with non-disabled friends specifically about access and like, making the world in a place where we all can thrive. But at the same time, as a Black person, sometimes it feels like there's a my foot still somehow like encouraging, not encouraging for anybody else, but like my brain is still clinging to some form of a medical model because I'm trying to prove my pain is real because based on your medical book, it says this and this and this, and I'm feeling that, but you didn't believe me before. And so it's a weird sort of relationship I have with almost sometimes like wanting to almost like overly medicalize it so that the pain is believed to prove that it's real, even though that's not all of how my disability is experienced, and that might not be so helpful for the grand scheme of things, but it's almost like as a response to medicine and that medical structures denying the existence of this pain or even downplaying it. It's almost like I have found myself, and other of my Black disabled friends have said this, where it's like you're wanting to over medicalize in order to prove yourself. So there's a behavioral relationship with that I don't have an answer for, but I guess like some of the reading and exploring has been interesting, and having these conversations about how much we look into these models, or how much maybe I'm inadvertently even like not doing what I say I'm doing, where I'm like, yeah, social model, blah, blah, blah. Am I actually practicing that mentally when I'm trying to prove like that what I'm feeling is real? If that makes sense. I don't know if I just waffled there, but these are some thoughts that I've had for a while, to be fair. So it's a good question.
Hi, Kenny. David has a question in the room.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, thank you. Yeah, really interesting discussion about the pain. My question is about really something you said a while ago about your relationship between art and disability. You said, I'm not sure I would be an artist if I wasn't disabled. And I just find that a really interesting remark, and I just wondered if you could expand on it a little bit, because It's just that connection between creativity and disability that I'm particularly interested with in my own work with blind aesthetics.
I I say that I didn't feel like I wouldn't have been an artist if I'm not disabled, because I was thinking about who I was beforehand. I was like a bit of an arrogant film student, you know, like, and I wanted to be a cinematographer, and I wasn't. It's like film is creative, but I actually can feel like it's quite formulaic and quite like the way that the industry works is very hierarchical. And oh, you need this shot, I'm going to do, like, there was not much creation there, rather than like wanting to fit into the structures that already existed in film. And then becoming disabled meant I wasn't able to practice trying to be a cinematographer in that way anymore. And it meant that there was this desperate need to create, a desperate need to speak to something, to find a language in order to express, that I don't think I would have sought if I didn't become disabled. I think we have these conversations. I'm not the first disabled person to say it, but it's like disabled people were always like creating new pathways, new ways of being, of expressing, of seeing, of not seeing. You know, we're always creating new things to either survive or to explain, or wherever that may be. I think by nature, disabled people are creative in general, and oftentimes this extends itself to art, and creating art that I think personally might not have even existed had it not been for the ways in which we navigate the world. And so I didn't even see myself as an artist straight away after coming disabled. But when I made that first film, it was like, oh, I would not be thinking in this way to even create, to even make art, if it not had been for that. There wasn't a desperation or a craving to do it that existed prior to my disability.
Hiya. I think both of your respective artworks really stuck with me, that they exist in lots of time frames, and there's a lot of historicism to them, and present, and kind of linking between these periods, and sort of inherited pain and ancestral pain and cyclical systemic pain. And I was interested in what both of you would want to see or envision for your personal experience or your community's experience of pain in the future, like what that would look like, what you aspire for, how that could be different. Because I think also with a lot of looking at archival material and stuff like this, you have to work with what is there. And I would be so interested what you would want to work with if you had that agency in the future.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, when I think about it, I would like to focus more on how, like, our communities sort of like help heal each other. I mean, in the indigenous community, we have a lot of issues with like lateral violence, and so that's like an issue for me. I mean, I would rather be talking about how, yeah, how indigenous communities like help each other get deal with like mental health crises, and sort of like how love can save someone. Like, I remember all the times I've been suicidal that someone has saved me is just because they've been there for me, and not like talking me down or anything. It's just like they were in my house and they made me some tea, and like they put me to bed. Like really basic things. So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe because sometimes I'm like, oh, there's like so much mental pain. I would like to talk about what helps ease the mental pain sometimes.
I think the different changes I'd want to see, I guess, outside of art is quite basic, but like Black people to be believed when they say they're experiencing pain, but also, I don't want to see sickle cell patients dying in the corridor because people are not understanding the severe pain, or even understanding sickle cell in itself, and denying them pain medication, which is what happened to the first person you see in the film, Lola. This was separately off the record, but like, and she's okay with me sharing this. I have asked her permission in the past, but she has had to call an ambulance while in another hospital because they weren't giving her pain medication for a sickle cell crisis. Shortly after that, a young man died in the same way, and they checked and he was calling an ambulance. I don't want that to happen anymore. I don't want Black birthing parents to die disproportionately. I don't, I could list it on and on and on. So I don't want that. Secondly, it's kind of weird saying this as someone who made a film called On Black Pain, but Black people to fund stuff that's also about the other parts of ourselves. I find it interesting. I actually find it harder to get funding when I'm not talking about more challenging things in art. People quite readily want to fund when I'm talking about these sort of topics, which I think is great. But I often find when I've written about other stuff or tried to pitch for other stuff, there's less of an appetite for it. And I find that it's quite interesting that Black pain's not believed in medical environments, but oftentimes it is celebrated when we can reconstruct it and present it for a wider audience. You know, actresses will win Oscars, and oftentimes they are playing characters in pain. Lupita Nyong'o, they're playing enslaved people. The first person to, I think, Black woman to win an Oscar was playing sort of a mammy caricature. She wasn't even allowed to be buried alongside other Oscar winners. You know, she had to sit at a separate table. And it's quite interesting to be able to award it, to fund it, but then also when we want to talk about other stuff alongside this, which while it's important, I think that there is less appetite for it. So perhaps also while talking about pain, yes, is important, and literally it's quite funny because my films are literally called this. It's also like looking at the other dimensions of Black identity and our experiences as well. I would like to see that too. It's important for us to talk about this, of course, but there are other things. So maybe if the medical side of it is also like progressive, maybe then will there be an appetite for funding outside of Black people talking about these things? I think that's a good question to ask.
Okay, well, I think that's a good way to wrap things up. We're about to go to lunch. We have an hour for lunch, so people should be back at one. I'm going to get the time right because I'm in a completely different time zone. 1:15. We can start up again, and we have a wonderful afternoon planned. So we'll see you soon. Thanks so much, Jameisha. Thanks, Theo.